Hello and welcome to BayBrazil Annual Conference number 9. We are supposed to be having music, having an opening music right now, but our musician is having a bit of a problem. We hope he'll be able to join us later on in the session. For those of you joining us for the first time, we've been doing this online series in our annual conference because this year is a very special one for us at Bay Brazil. We are celebrating our 10th anniversary. That's why we decided to expand our annual conference. We miss seeing you and being with you in person, but at the same time, our team is so glad that more of you are having access to our speakers and to this amazing information that they are passing to us. So we've had already discussions about the future of a fintech, the future of a real estate, and all these discussions are in our YouTube channel. Follow us there and watch and recommend for those who might have missed. So today we are having a special panel with a group of Brazilian and American designers to discuss the role of design in tech innovation. I'm super excited, especially because leading our conversation, there will be Daniela Jorge. I think Daniela is on now with her video. Daniela, hello, Daniela. Daniela is joining us from Mountain View. Daniela is an exceptional leader that I have the honor to have as a teammate at Bay Brazil, as a board member, helping us to grow, to shape our organization. Daniela is Vice President of Global Design and Research, User Research at PayPal, leading a team of 150 designers, creating experiences not only for PayPal, but also Venmo and Zoom. Thank you so much, Daniela, for helping us with this event. It's with you now.
Thank you, Margarisi, and congratulations on the 10th anniversary of BayBrazil. So as
Thank you.
Margarisi mentioned, today we're going to be joined by a phenomenal group of design leaders, both American and Brazilian, and I'll introduce them in just a little bit. And we're going to structure the conversation in two parts. The first hour is going to be focused on the business value of design and how practices like design thinking can really help you discover opportunities and deliver solutions that customers love. Then in the second hour, we'll really dive into trends in both design and consumer behavior. When I was preparing for this conversation, I was reflecting on why I got into design personally. So I moved to the US to study design 30 years ago. And I really wanted to design cars. That was my dream. I studied industrial design. And when I was thinking about this in the consumer goods arena, good design is just part of your product. No one questions the value of it. You can't sell products if they're not designed well, right? It's just part of how we actually create consumer products. But that hasn't necessarily been the case for digital design, even though as an industry and as a field, we've been around for a while. I think there's always still a bit of that remaining question of what is the value of investing in design in the digital arena and in software and applications and web design. So on one hand, what we're seeing is design is highly seen and appreciated as a strategic partner. We're in highest demand than we've ever been. It's hard to hire designers. There's not enough designers in the market. But on the other hand, we're still sometimes viewed as just actually making something pretty and in having to justify our ROI. But that's starting to change as we get some hard data behind the value that having good design provides to a business. So 2 years ago, McKinsey & Company published a report on the business value of design. And it's really become the primary reference in our industry on the subject. So it's my pleasure to introduce Fabrizio Dori, who's the VP of Design at McKinsey and one of the authors of this report. He's going to share some highlights to kick us off today, and then we'll follow it up with a conversation with Fabrizio and Karen, who will introduce you in just a minute. Fabrizio, I'll let you take it away.
Thank you, Daniela, for the introduction. So I will do a maneuver here to project. Give me just a second as I make this work in live and see if it works. Can you see my screen? Beautiful.
Yes, we can.
Fantastic. So I'll move forward. So as Daniela was saying, here is just like a small extract of the material and the data that we collected. And I think before going into it, I can share why we did it and a little bit of my perspective as we were building it. So as you can imagine, design for McKinsey, it started a couple of years ago when design became a part of creating value across product, service, and digital. And it started, obviously, it was ambitious, but it was also a small beginning, right? It's just a group of people starting to connect design to consulting like McKinsey that has all the analytical background and 100 years of history of a certain methodology of problem solving and analytical thinking. And as we moved with that, we realized that design was becoming, exactly as Daniela was saying, was becoming so important to our clients, but at the same time, we lacked the data to talk about it in a structured way, and in a way that we could relate to specific issues and practices of design within those companies. We got together, a group of people from different parts of the world, and we started thinking like how we would do it, like how to measure design, right? And there's a bunch of different ways and perceptions of how to measure design. But I think for us was let's do it from the bottom up and understand what is the impact that specific practices have, and understand the data as what the data is telling us. And it was very interesting from as a designer to have that conversation, because as a designer I assume that design has value. That's why I do it. And then having going with a blank sheet of paper and just asking companies how they were doing, what are the practices that they were doing, correlating that. It was a bit of a moment for me, at least in that group. Imagine that we don't see any correlation between those practices and actually value creation. But I think happily we saw the correlation, and the effect was the opposite of having a strong confirmation of that. So as a methodology, we analyzed data over the period of 5 years, more than 300 companies. We gathered that data, which was more than 2 million pieces of financial data, and we ran the models. And the conclusion is that actually design is good business. And we've been, and some people in the industry have been saying that for many years. But I think the difference is that now we have more confidence that it's an affirmation that we have, a backup and a structured way to say, yes, it's good business because of this, and that, right? And I think the top level learning, the top level data that came out of it is this page, that shows that compared to all the industry benchmarks, and we used S&P, and we used important financial indexes from the world. In all of them, the companies that are part of the first quartile, the ones that demonstrated the most usage of design practices, they outperform all of them in all the dimensions. either in, and especially in revenue growth and TRS as the kind of core dimensions that we're using. And the actual number that, which is the average of the three segments, so three sectors that we measured, is that the top performers, they grow revenue 32% faster than the other ones, and grows total return to shareholders about 56% faster than their peers in the industry. And it was also very interesting to see that it happens across the industries that we researched, which were CPG, medical, and retail. And obviously, I mean, there's a couple different differences between them and things that we saw. However, it's true to all of them, right? And this is an important message because they operate in very different environments and have very different, competition, development cycles, and across them, we could see that the result was positive and demonstrated the value of design. But not only that, and this was a very interesting surprise when we looked through the numbers, is that there is a pretty big difference between the first quartile and the other quartiles that we separated. Which for us it spells very in a very clear way that to get the most value of design, you can't go halfway. Like you have to go full into adopting design practices in the company. So it's not about it's the typical I hired two designers, they're doing something, we don't know exactly what it is, they're not fully integrated, we don't have a senior leader. And it's going to be fine. So we actually saw that this will get you up to a certain point, but it won't get you to the full extent of extracting the benefits of the value of design. So I'll stop here in this page just to go through the points, because I think this is a good takeaway from this today, as it's a short discussion. There are 12 dimensions 12 themes that we saw a strong correlation with the financial performance of these companies. And we grouped them in these 4 groups. So the first one is analytical leadership. And I think the summary of that, we have some actions on the right side, but the summary of that is facing and understanding that the data that comes out of design work, that talks about customer centricity, that talks about the specific metrics of design, they should be seen in the same level as you would do with revenue or cost, with financial data of the company. So it has to be part of the discussion with the CEO. It has to be discussed by the company as a whole, and it's the only way to actually track and see the progress of value creation of design. The second one is cross-functional talent. Funnily enough, there's still a lot of companies that they hire amazing talent, but they put this talent in a beautiful room, full of great stuff and great design, but they never connect this talent with the rest of the organization. So this is a common issue that we saw, and obviously the companies that create the most value of design, they distribute those designers throughout the organization as a cross-functional talent. The third group is the continuous iteration. So is the connection between design thinking and prototyping early with agility. But not only that, is bringing in a very fluid way data, like quantitative data and qualitative data together, and colliding those as sources of inspiration, and not only qualitative as a starting point, and obviously fast cycles and testing and learning from users. And the fourth one is the user experience, and this is really about nearly every company these days. You don't have a product or a service or an environment as just that anymore. But actually, it's about integrated experiences, not only within the company, but also with other companies. So having this perception of the user experience as being the responsibility of everybody, but also approaching it from a very holistic perspective, we saw that it was correlated with value creation. And to close here, just saying that we're very much, funnily enough, as exactly Daniela was saying, we're still in the beginning of this learning curve in a lot of organizations. So about 66% of the companies that were involved in the process, they don't share prototypes with end users, for example, or 50% don't involve users prior to launching a product. And the majority of design leaders, they feel they can't make objective decisions as, for example, there isn't a clear vision for design and for the experience of the company as a whole. So it's just as I said, just an extract, a quick extract from the study. But I think, as I said, it was rewarding. It was frightening in the beginning, but rewarding to see that actually good design is good business, and we have the data to support that.
Thank you, Fabricio. And I think someone needs to turn my video back on, but the full report, as you saw on the last slide, is actually available. If you just Google business value of design, you'll be able to access the full report. Like I said, it's definitely a reference for me. And we'll get into a bit more on how we can actually put this in practice. And for that, I'd like to welcome Karen Hansen to the conversation. Karen is the Executive Vice President of Experience Design at Wells Fargo. She's also a good friend and someone that I've had the pleasure of working with for a few years. And Karen was one of the pioneers of introducing design thinking into as a corporate practice during her time at Intuit. So Karen, thank you for joining us. I was lucky enough to be at Intuit when you were introducing Design for Delight, which was our flavor of design thinking. And we'll get into that journey in a little bit. But before we start, I actually wanted to have you talk about probably the other item that I always reference when I'm talking about the value of design, in addition to the McKinsey report, is actually some really groundbreaking work that you did talking about the impact of good design on NPS, or Net Promoter Score, which is the likelihood to recommend survey that many of you are hopefully familiar with. So would love to have you share a bit about those insights that you developed while at Intuit.
Well, I'd love to. And thank you again for having me here. I'm really, really pleased to be here. So I would say that, at Intuit, we started looking at Net Promoter Score as a measure for how are we doing in our experience. But personally, I care a lot about helping people take action. And what we found from Net Promoter Score is a little bit too high level for our teams to actually take action on it. So we ran a series of studies, or experiments, if you will, to really understand what were those dimensions that contribute to Net Promoter Score. And after running a series of these, think 10 or 12 different studies, we found that 3 dimensions account for about 75% of the variance in Net Promoter Score. The first dimension is the customer benefit. Is there a benefit that the customer cares about? The second dimension is ease of use. Can the customer easily get that benefit? Can they succeed at doing what they want to do? And the third dimension was essentially, did it feel good to the customer? And depending upon if you were a small business or a consumer, the amount of variance that was accounted for by each of those 3 dimensions varied a little bit, but it was roughly 25, 25, and 25. Now, what's useful about knowing that is this makes it much more actionable for the teams. So I'm going to give you a brief example. For simplicity's sake, let's assume you already know the benefits, right, to the customer of the product you're providing. So Wells Fargo, one of the things we're doing right now is we're redesigning our account open experience. And we have determined that simply by helping people more frequently succeed, right, through both the increase in new accounts as well as the reduction in chat for questions or phone calls for questions, we're going to increase our revenue by about $100 million, right? That's real money. And that's simply by focusing on that dimension of ease of use. I'm going to give you another example, and this is focused more on how we might evoke positive emotions. So one of the ways to evoke more positive emotion is to focus on the craft or the visual polish of the product. And so a great example of this was at Facebook. Often you'll run into places where you'll see that there are a 2-pixel difference in the spacing, right, of text and a button, for example, right? This is something that designers see. They look at the page and it makes them crazy, and no one else even notices. And in fact, these often get labeled not a bug, right? Because they're not impeding something from happening. So at Facebook, we went through and we did a hackathon where engineers cleaned up over 100 of these not a bug issues. The result of that, doing a very rigorous experiment, was 1% higher revenue for a particular segment of users. At Facebook, 1% higher revenue is seriously big money. Now, what I liken it to is when you go to a restaurant and you notice there might be like a hair on the floor or a crumb on the table, or maybe the silverware is a little bit haphazard. None of that impacts how your meal tastes, but it surely impacts how you feel, right? That's the equivalent of the visual polish. So again, customer benefit, ease of use, and does it make me feel good? Those are 3 different factors that each contribute significantly to the Net Promoter, the overall experience people have.
Thank you. Can you share a little bit more about the customer benefit part? I actually think that that's one that we always have debates on, and I probably have lost count of the number of times that it's really hard for companies are very good, obviously, at thinking about benefit to them, but not as good about articulating benefit for the customer and having that be the driving force. So do you have a couple of examples of what those sound like or look like?
Yeah, and so it's interesting. So, one of the places, Scott Cook at Intuit is very good at focusing on the customer benefit. And he literally starts every conversation with the product team by saying, what's the customer problem we're trying to solve, right? And that customer problem often will then turn into the benefits that you're looking for. So thinking again about Intuit, what is the customer problem I'm trying to solve? I need to get my taxes done quickly and accurately. That's a problem that I've got. So Intuit is going to come along and help me. Or you think about the car that you're going to drive. I need to get to my job. How am I going to do that efficiently and comfortably, right? That might be the problem that I'm trying to solve. There might be many solutions to that, one of which is a car.
Great, thank you. That's really helpful. So it's been probably, what, a decade since Design for Delight was first introduced.
Yeah.
So
I have gray hair.
You and me both. So I would just love to learn a little bit about your journey since, and what have you learned, and how has your thinking on this developed?
Yeah, I mean, I would say at Intuit, we had a ton of learnings, and it was obviously like a lot of people were a part of that. And most of us have really deep scars on our backs because we failed in so many ways, right, before we succeeded, which is natural. But I would say a couple key learnings. One is to make sure that you are pulling together those stories of success, right? And really focusing on how are we going to measure success, and then tying that back to ROI, because those stories become invaluable for the company and for helping other people understand what matters. And a big part of that, of course, is measurement. I would say another important element of success is going to where people want you to be. Right? Not everybody is going to embrace design immediately in your company, but there are going to be areas where they're more ready to embrace it. So you put all of your energy there and you show great work and great impact. And then over time, the people who are more on the fence will be willing to try. There will always be some people who don't want it, don't care, don't believe. That's okay. You don't need everybody. You just need, most of them.
Great. So, shifting gears a little bit, I would love to get super practical. And Fabrizio, maybe starting with you, and thinking about what are 3 practical things that companies or anyone who wants to deliver good design and in turn good business results can adopt, starting today or starting tomorrow?
It's a good question, and I think reflecting on the research that we did, but also on our learnings, through our client work. Because I think that's the real test of all of this. I think there's a couple of things that come to mind. The metrics part, I think it's very important, but it's been extremely challenging for a lot of companies. And I've been listening. It's an interesting thing because there isn't one way to measure design right now in the world, and it's very interesting to hear what Karen was saying about the NPS. So NPS is definitely one way, but it's very, very high level, as she was saying. So I've seen teams exploring with digital marketing data, for example, being very good friends of their digital marketers in their company and borrowing some of that data. Because a lot of that data is actually very customer centric, right? It's based on real customer actions. But taking it to the next level and treating it as a very important piece of the design work, which is not natural for a lot of designers. Meaning, there's a bunch of tools out there that companies have been using and we use with clients that you can easily hook up from like measuring NPS to just tracking interactions in web and app and whatever. But putting that on the wall, as a dashboard, making it as a serious part of the design work. And integrating that fully into the design work, as I was saying, the qualitative and the quantitative. There's no design today without quantitative data. There's no design, at all. And I've noticed that teams that embrace that and that use that in a structured way, they perform better. The point about how designers are integrated in the teams, it's very, very important, and I think that brings some very real questions of how it's going to be your design organization, who is going to lead, what kind of leaders you need, what's going to be the scope of it, and that correlates with all the way to having designers distributed in teams, to having a center of excellence, for example, to drive design forward. And the articulation of the design organization and the governance of it, it's a very clear and an important one. And I think the other one is related to talent and teams and seniority. I've seen a lot of companies that, because they are in the beginning of their learning curve of how to extract the most value of design, they don't have a senior design leader, for example. Or they think it's going to solve their design problem to have a mid-level manager, and not bringing that to the C-level, for example. And that gets you somewhere. That's for sure. That's better than not having designers at all. But it's it brings it's almost like they're looking at Apple. But they are, bringing putting a junior design team and thinking that they're gonna get there. It's just not gonna work. So having, a senior design leader, having that senior design leader attract talent to that company, build that talent, and taking it seriously. It's probably, I think, the three things that come to mind.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Thank you.
Yeah, I agree.
Karen,
yeah, I agree with a lot of what you said. I would just add a couple things. One is that if you're not sure what to start with in terms of your metrics, start with a success rate. In 90% of the cases, there will be something that customer is trying to do, and you can determine were they successful or not. Not only is that fairly simple and straightforward to actually instrument and track, it's also incredibly easy for the designers and all of their partners to understand. So when you're going to your CEO and you're like, hey, we're at 70% success, we're trying to get to 85, they get it immediately.
Yes.
Whereas more complicated metrics, if it takes a long time to figure it out, you've lost a lot of the people. The other item I would say that we're starting with, and I've been at Wells Fargo for just a year, and we're really working to radically improve the experiences there and really rebuilding this design team. And I would say that we've also been focused on the customer journey. So again, going back to what's the customer problem we're trying to solve, we're creating journey maps of the current experience as a tool to align people against. And then we're creating journey maps of the experience we will be creating. Partly to align us where we're getting better, and also to be honest about where we're not making a difference, right? Because you don't want people to think, well, we did a redesign, so we're done, if the reality is we're still nowhere near done. So that's been incredibly helpful. And then I would just, reinforce again that notion of get some strong design talent in there. The difference between strong design talent and not so strong design talent is enormous.
Yeah, and building on your second point, Karen, we commonly talk about the transition from touch points to journeys, which I think it's interesting because for us it's quite obvious, right? We've been thinking journeys and thinking about the experience as a whole, like beyond the transaction, right? For forever, let's say. But it's not an obvious thing for a lot of companies. But the moment they do it, it's eye-opening. They realize that it's much more than that single interaction that they need to make it better. And I've seen in amazing situations in case, including on B2B, because a lot of times we think about design in B2C, but in B2B, some companies in sectors oil and gas and sectors that you wouldn't imagine are benefiting from that approach, and I can second that.
Yeah. And I would also say the benefit of a journey map is it really puts you in your place, because you realize that customer's experience, only part of it has to do with you, right? So much of their experience is with their friends and family outside of your particular interactions. Yeah.
Yeah, no,
Great.
absolutely. We just launched a series of mindsets at PayPal for the design team, and they're the 5 are customer-centric, curiosity, outside in, continuous assessment, and end-to-end. So all things that we covered here, but the reason why I wanted to highlight those is that these are not only important for the design team to practice, they're even more important for us to teach others and sort of instill those mindsets in all of our cross-functional partners. And if they're practicing those, then I think all of the value that both of you shared is exponentially bigger. So I think that's the other thing too for designers or for those that are considering building out a design organization, is that the practice of design can't just be left to the design organization. It's important for everyone to be all in and actually practicing these mindsets.
Well, and it's interesting you say that, Daniela, because we didn't turn it around until we made the decision that we were going to give away design thinking, right? We called it design for delight, but we gave it away to everybody, and we worked to get it in the company's DNA. And when that happened, that's when everything started to thrive. Because all of a sudden, even though people might not know just how deep we were getting when we got deep customer empathy, they knew kind of what it was, and they knew it was important. Right? So that created the space and the buy-in, which was fantastic.
Yes, absolutely. It makes a huge difference. And when you both mentioned those customer journey maps, I think that is such a good way of actually getting everyone to appreciate, either the pain or those opportunities for delight that we have with customers. So doing that, I think exposing, cross-functional teams, engineers, product managers, leaders to things like customer clips, if they're not actually participating in the customer sessions, I think the more that we can do that and to build that empathy so that everyone cares about the experience, then you really start seeing those huge returns, because everyone is then invested in great customer experience. So on the flip side, are there any pitfalls that companies need to watch for, I think, as they're adopting these practices?
So my favorite one, I always talk about how the most powerful force in the universe is inertia. I'm not actually sure if that's true in the laws of physics or not, but boy, is it an incredibly powerful force. And the upshot is, people have developed habits and organizations have developed habits, and those habits are how they got to where they are today. So when you're trying to introduce new behaviors or new ways of thinking, you're going to have to replace some of those habits, and it's tough, right? And how tough that is when you're like trying to get out, every morning to go for a run or whatnot, right? Like that is a hard behavior to change. And that's when you're trying to change it just in yourself. So when you're thinking about that change in the organization, anything you can do to go after that inertia, whether it's reinforcing the new behaviors and operating mechanisms or other parts of the company that are already on a cycle, the better off you're going to be. But boy, don't underestimate that. I still do all the time.
Yeah, and I think I was reflecting, I think there is something like when I have the discussions of the pitfalls, a lot of times I tend to either if if it's my team, if it's a client team, if it's somewhere I'm teaching, whatever, I try to kind of bring the responsibility back to us as designers, because there's a lot of, when I think about the pitfalls, a lot of times there are things like, this company doesn't value design, or, it's not given its space, or, something like that. And I think that's definitely, it's a 50-50, right? Type of, if I think about the pitfalls, I think there's a part of the company for sure. And as you can see, as we can all see, like in the research, it was a surprise to me as well. I mean, that jump to the first quartile, right? I mean, that's where you reap the value. That's where you create value of design. And I see a lot of companies going halfway, as I was saying, like and not going into like, let's do this thing right. Let's get a senior leader. Let's get a team in place. Let's do this. As a and a lot of companies are let's try this thing, see if it's going to work out, and so. But there's plenty of data, including that study, to show that it's valuable. So I think that side should be almost covered, in the sense that I think we have arguments, and I think it's also about business leaders to look for that information. But I think bringing the responsibility back to us as designers, right? We need to be able to communicate those things, articulate, and also understand, like, what does it mean to have a proper design organization with a proper setup. So designers also need to talk the language of the business, right? To be able to have those conversations and remove the pitfalls. Because I think a lot of the pitfalls is basically are things as simple as because someone doesn't value design because doesn't know what it means, what's the impact it can bring, the full extent of what the activity means. So I would bring also back the responsibility to us designers to be able to remove those pitfalls and have those conversations.
Yeah, no, that's also, I think, ties in a little bit to my example, which is I think sometimes as a design community, we can lean too much on our analytical side and not so much on the sort of creative. So we focused on the practice of design as opposed to the outcomes. And to borrow, I think, another term from Intuit, which is we'll spend too much time admiring the problem or chasing the perfect solution instead of testing and learning with users. And to your point earlier, Fabricio, right? Like really getting those wins, because you also need to get, I think, some of those tangible wins that you can then tie back to good design. And it can also become a bit of an issue as everyone else starts to, I think, get familiar with customer insights or try to be, build their empathy, which is everyone then becomes paralyzed in wanting to do the perfect thing. So how do you balance that, right? Balancing the practice of a great process with actually delivering outcomes and doing that quickly enough, whatever quickly means in your industry, I think is also crucial.
And it also, for me, it connects with the point. I think a point that it's a regular, it comes up very often, which is how the designers are prepared to deal with that, right? Are they having the right education? Are they prepared in the right way? Do they know how to deal with the analytical, quantitative part of their work? Can they communicate it? So I think there's also a discussion around, like, how do we prepare the teams, right? And how do we grow the teams to be doing the design that we need to be happening right now, which is, design is changing, like right now, like as we practice our work. If you look 5 years ago, the tools were completely different, the expectations were different, technology was different, right? And design is, is changing that process. So I think we also need to prepare our teams to be able to do as we say, the design with capital D.
So one last question before we open it up, I think, to questions from those who are watching, which is, if you're an individual who's trying to convince your company to invest in design or in design thinking or in the practice of design, what's one advice that you have for them that we haven't perhaps touched on yet?
I mean, this is something we have touched on, but I would just say if you're getting started, the first thing to do is get those success rates and tie it to a business outcome. And then just start to collect those case studies.
Yeah, I second that. I think bring the the business language to design, and build your dashboard. Start tracking your data, but don't lose the heart, right? We need to be empathic leaders as well.
Awesome. So with that, I think Margarisi, we're going to open it up to some questions. Do we have any?
Yes, a question for Karen. Tarun Rawat, Executive Creative Director of PwC, is asking, what is the role of design and design thinking in the COVID-19 era, where organizations just want to spend on the bare essentials to survive and mind their cash reserves?
So what is the role of design thinking in that? The role of design thinking is to solve problems really well and to come up with solutions you hadn't thought about before, right? So I would say COVID-19 just presents another opportunity where we have gnarly problems that we need to solve well, and we need the tools of design thinking and design to do that. Yeah, it's exactly the same.
Yeah, and I would love to complement that. I think we've been having a lot of discussions on that at McKinsey and with our clients, and I think the role of design has never been more important, to be honest. Yeah. I think we've been the point number one I think that I can mention is that we need to be extremely and much closer to our customers as companies, right? And into those customers and understand what they're doing, what's changing in their behaviors, what's changing in their mindset. There was some impressive, amazing cases that I've seen in the last few days of companies that are starting to communicate back with customers, and they start the communication back with "How are you?" and being extremely empathic with those customers. So I think, not only that, but also there's a lot of things to be reimagined right now. All the way from how stores operate, how to make digital much easier for people that haven't used digital. We saw in the beginning of the whole crisis, at least in Brazil, that about 35% of the people that were using their internet banking services or asking on delivery apps, they were doing it for the first time. Imagine the experience for these people, right? And all the way to reinventing how we work, right? And there's plenty of research out there. The last one I saw is that 70% of the people want to stay working from home, and how that changes in the office space, how that changes in the tools that we use. So I think there's plenty of design work right now.
And Daniela, we are also having some questions coming from Facebook, people who are watching us. And Natalie Garcia is asking, how do you measure qualitative improvements in monetary terms? Yeah. I think you can comment on that also, Daniela. And Karen, go ahead.
Yeah. Well, I was going to say that, again, you're always going to be trying to link the two. So when I think about the example, when I was at Facebook, making that change from 20 pixels to 22 pixels of padding, right? That's a very qualitative improvement, right? You're cleaning up the visual polish. If we had tried to link that to business revenue for one little shift, we wouldn't have found a thing. But it was the cumulative impact of fixing 100+ little diddly issues, and then doing that rigorous experiment that allowed us to make that linkage. So what I would say the question on here is, what are the qualitative improvements that you're making? What is the outcome you're expecting to shift? And then how can you set up a study to do that? And again, there may well be cases where the shifts that you're making are small enough that you wouldn't pick it up in your bigger measures, in which case think about how can you bundle them together.
Yeah, we've seen the same, both at PayPal and probably every company that I've worked at, where sometimes changing a sentence or a paragraph, and all of a sudden we will see conversion or click through. improvements that we can that was the only thing that actually changed on the A/B tests. So if you can A/B test your experiences, that's really important. I think to Karen's point also, being, having a clear hypothesis of before you even come up with the solutions of what is it that you're trying to do and how is this change going to influence it, and then measuring it, I think is always the best way, and then accumulating those examples. So at PayPal, we started a Slack channel where we share any experiments that have had positive revenue results that can be directly attributed to UX changes. So we share that with our chief product officer, we share it with all of our partners. And the more you can actually reinforce that, the more then everyone starts realizing that there's always that direct tie-in.
And one last question for this first part of our session, and then I'll turn it back to you, Daniela. It's from Ellen Kiss. In your opinion, what are the core skills for future design leaders, and what will be their roles in their organizations? Karen.
So I always look for, so I would say leadership, right? That strong leadership, strong design craft, the ability to truly produce great experiences, and the ability to link that to business outcomes. I think if you've got those three, you've nailed those three, you're going to be in pretty good shape for a while, knowing that the technologies will shift, the business models will shift, but then you'll be able to adapt accordingly.
Yeah, no, I tend to agree with that. I think it's one of those $1 million questions, right? I mean, it's a challenging one, but I think if I can comment, one thing is, I think I have this constant feeling that design is in the verge of moving and changing to something completely new in the next coming years, as technology changes, as the practice changes. So I think a design leader at this point, I think obviously being concerned with the business outcomes, and nurturing a team of incredible people, incredible designers, but also helping these designers to make this transition into what are the new capabilities, what do we need to be designers for the future, right? As everything that we're doing changes, and we don't even know if it's if we're going to be doing UX design in 5 years, because technology is moving so fast. So I think just the adaptability and being very, very on top of all of those things and being able to bring people together, I think will be definitely a core skill.
The other quick trend I would say that I do believe is going to become increasingly important is the ability to think about the unintended consequences, and to be really thinking about the ethics and the impacts of some of the decisions that we make. There's an article in the New York Times about Robinhood and about some of the unintended consequences of some of the designs that were created to be very easy and captivating. I had an experience with Tesla recently, which was great. On the other hand, boy, did I spend a lot of money really quickly with zero friction, right? So again, when are we really helping people, and when are we maybe putting them in a position that might not be the best ultimately?
And if I can add one thing that made me think about something else, I think there's something that I've been feeling as well that I think it's important for all of us, and then moving into the future is having the ability to create a vision for things and bold vision for things. Because I think we've been, I don't know if you guys feel the same, but I think we've been through a trend of there was a lot of big thinking on design in the past, and Papanek and people were thinking about designers having a big role in the world. And we moved into the world where we're measuring every single little thing. And I just keep getting back to this feeling of being afraid of design just becoming this measuring every little thing. But I think the ability to think big about things, and I think there was one thing that I can, close my participation. There's something that got me very inspired recently. It's always a design product, but there was I can say brand names here, right? There was Nike launched a new series of products that were made of trash. And I think that was so inspiring, as who would think of making a product out of trash? that's typical, typical from a designer. Let's just take trash and make it, into products. And I think this is so big in the sense of, as a mindset change, as kind of, setting up a vision for things. So I think we need to keep the ability of having a bold vision for things.
Yes, I couldn't agree more. I think it's, summing up what both of you mentioned, when I think about great designers and designers of the future, it's not about the work output that we're producing, right? It is about being sort of those stewards of the experience, and helping to facilitate co-creation and setting that bold vision and helping to identify those success measures. And again, thinking of experiences, not, that one screen that your user may be looking at, but thinking about full context, really understanding customers. So it's really at a much higher level than I think where some designers operate, which is much more at that pixel level. And to your point, Fabricio, right, as experiences move away from screens, and we'll be talking about that later, but that will even be less relevant. So, and then the facilitation part, the co-creation part, because we can't, ship our work alone. So I think convincing a Nike to actually create products from trash, et cetera, right, that took influencing, that took bringing others along and actually defining that bold vision with others. So that sounds like a great note for us to wrap up this session on, Margarisi. So I will hand it to you for the transition. Thank you, Fabricio, and thank you, Karen. Please feel free to stay and also contribute in the second hour.
Thank you. It was a pleasure.
Thank you so much, Fabricio. Thank you, Karen. How great to have you for the first time in our annual conference. Thank you. Hope you'll be back.
Thank you, for sure.
All right. Well, now, Daniela, we are having another part of our event here, focus on changes in human design and changes in human behavior and global trends in design. And for that, we have another set of phenomenal designers joining us from Brazil and from here in Silicon Valley. Belmer, are you with us? Yes.
Yes, I'm here.
Great. Belmer prepared a presentation for us, and he's working. Belmer is joining us from San Francisco. Belmer?
Correct.
Great. So Belmer is working at Facebook, leading AR and VR design teams. I'm so happy to have you here in our conference, Belmer. You joined us a long time ago.
It's my pleasure.
It was about time for you to be back. So yeah. I guess I'll let you to say a few words about your experience, and look forward to hearing your presentation.
Thank you so much, Margarisi.
Thank you, Belmer. And if you don't mind, I just wanted to do a quick intro and introduce everyone, and then turn it over to you, Belmer.
Sure. And
it's good to see you again. Belmer and I worked together at eBay, and it's been a few years, so it's great to actually have a reunion here. So like Margarisi said, we're going to be speaking a little bit about trends in design and also changes in consumer behavior. And when I was thinking about the session, I did some gathering of some of these changes that we have seen even since the pandemic. Of course, these are very different times, extreme times, but it's been really interesting to see how the external situation has really influenced behavior. And I'm going to go through some of these bullets. So the first thing is, obviously we saw a bunch of offline businesses having to quickly move to e-commerce in order to survive. So there's been there was this very big rush of businesses that were only purely offline, having to then set up e-commerce stores. Contactless payments obviously has become quite common now because of the pandemic in physical retail. In consumer purchasing trends, this one I always giggle at and can fully understand. So we saw people buying more tops than bottoms, because we're in video all day long, so people might be in exercise pants at home or shorts, but wearing professional tops. Board games, purchasing flour to bake bread, which we know I think everyone was doing while in quarantine. In-home exercise equipment. So definitely some different categories popping up just because of this. The other one is obviously large businesses, small businesses, schools operating virtually, and being on Zoom or other VC solutions all the time, and then even families communicating over videos. Probably all of us have participated in a virtual happy hour since the pandemic started. I've seen virtual weddings, I've heard of virtual dating. So a lot of changes in behavior, all packed into a 3 or 4 month span of time. Usually behavior changes a little bit more gradually, but I think it's been really helpful in highlighting why it's so important for us in design to understand, anticipate, and design for these types of shifts. So that's what we're going to be focusing on in the next hour. And I wanted to welcome everyone who will be part of this panel before handing it over to Belmer, who will do a short presentation. So why don't we go around and have each of you introduce yourselves. Belmer, we can leave you for last if you're introducing yourself as part of your presentation. So we'll start with Carlin. If you could just say a few words about what you do. And also tell us, what were you doing 10 years ago, since this is the 10th anniversary of BayBrazil and we're talking about trends and changes?
Yeah. So I am currently a design leader at Tesla, basically head up the design team that works on almost every digital experience except for the car UI, but do partner very closely with that team. I've been leading and involved in design for almost 20 years, mainly working on e-commerce, mainly on, I'd say 18 of those years more on consumer. Daniela, when I worked with you at PayPal, was the first time I jumped into the B2B and B2B2C, so which I'm doing both now at Tesla. 10 years ago, I think I was with you and Belmer at eBay. And hello, Belmer. It's been a while.
It's been a while.
I think when I was at eBay, I had the privilege of working on one of the very first iPhone apps as part of the announcement of the App Store at eBay. So that was 2009. So it was, I think, a year after that. But yeah, we were. I think we were. Were you still there, Belmer?
No. I left a long time ago.
Yeah. So quite a while ago, but yeah. So
great. Thank you, Carlin. And then Lucas Pettinari, who's the VP of design for Nubank. If you could also introduce yourself and tell us what you were doing 10 years ago and where in the world you were in your case.
Great. Well, thank you for having me, Daniela. So I lead design at Nubank. Nubank is Brazil's largest fintech. I've been here in Brazil for the past year, just about. Prior to that, I was actually working with Karin over at Facebook. So let's see, 10 years ago, I was becoming a dad. My oldest daughter was on her way. I was working at Yahoo, leading the Yahoo Flex Force team. So it was like an internal group that we would go and deal with important projects throughout the company.
Thank you, Lucas, and thank you for joining us from Sao Paulo. We also had Priscilla, who was planning to be part of this panel, but unfortunately won't be able to join us today due to a conflict. So with that, Belmer, I'm going to turn it over to you. Belmer is going to kick us off by sharing a bit about the world of AR, or augmented reality, which is obviously more relevant than ever as we shift into this virtual world. And then we'll look back to the panel to talk about other trends and changes in consumer behavior.
Oh, thank you, Daniela, and nice to see you guys again. Like it has been a long time. A little bit about myself. I'm right now I lead a team of designers and technical artists, and also work closely with engineers to create like immersive experiences in the AR VR group of Facebook. The AR VR group is a group that's focused on hardware that also includes like Oculus, Portal, that's what I work on, and AR glasses, like something that's more in the future, like exploration. Before that, like, 10 years ago, I was at eBay. And then was actually designing the search results page that was, my whole obsession was to remove containers and make content the main way you experience the page. And but then, like, after that, I moved to IDEO, where I stayed for 6 years. Like, I worked in the education practice for 4 years, and also in the entertainment practice for more 2 years, and was really fun. And but then, like, I want to go deeper in terms of machine learning and AR. And then I think consulting will not allow me to go that deep, and decided to move to the product side. And at that time I was building 8. That was this kind of experimental group at Facebook. And then I moved there to create like a consumer electronics that leverage those technologies. And my goal was always to think about how to humanize the technology, how to humanize AI, how to humanize machine learning, and especially coming from my formation of design from IDEO. I'm going to maybe start my presentation. Let me try to share the screen here. Hopefully it works smoothly. Display. Can you guys see it?
Yes.
Okay, so this is just like a warm up for our panel, right? Like I will share a quick overview of some of the trends around AR that may impact how people will behave in relation to space and in relation to other people. As we all know, like, and this panel is an example of this, shelter in place made us much more open to remote virtual experiences than before. VR and especially AR can have a positive impact in helping us to better connect with each other. We are not able to be in the same physical space. But before jumping into examples, I would like to clarify a bit what these terms mean and how we're using them. Most commonly, we say VR is when you're fully immersed with your senses, taking you to a simulation of an experience. And AR is the overlay on top of the real world. And some say that a mixed reality is when the virtual world is integrated with the real world in a cohesive and interactive way. But is bringing the display of your phone to in front of your eyes really AR? I think, and many people as well, think this is not the vision of AR, right? It's just like a snapshot in time, like of what can be done. And I think we all can agree that augmenting reality should be more than this. So for that reason, many people are stopping to use the term MR and simply using AR for all the experiences that are overlaid over the real world. Okay, now let's go a little bit deeper, but it's still an overview on some of the trends in the AR space. VR can be a subject for another talk. Let's start with what I call AR on the go. So from Microsoft HoloLens to Magic Leap to Facebook, all these big players are trying to get enter in the space and then get the closest to the look and feel of regular glasses, like something that a person would feel comfortable to use in public. And that's like more like the long-term vision of like what AR glasses should be, AR on the go. But of course, let's not forget about cell phones, right? There's still the way most consumers experience AR today. And here's some examples you're familiar with, like in this case, like when your phone works as a magnifying glass, showing content attached to physical surfaces, like placing an IKEA furniture or Pikachu on the streets in Pokemon Go. There's still also in the magnifying glass metaphor, like we have seen AR that has geolocated content associated to business and other points of interest. So you can kind of have in this kind of unveil this layer of content over the real world. But I want to get out of the smartphone for a moment, because talk about more the future, and if you think about the AR glasses, they're already being used in a significant way, but mostly rapidly growing in the enterprise space, like training and situation tools. So I'll play this little video. Hopefully it plays well.
This is a tool that works with existing processes, allowing a manager to get the right guides to their people. The instructions move with the employees, pointing them to the tools and parts they need, showing them exactly where they need to apply them. Employees get up to speed faster, with fewer errors and more confidence.
Yeah, in this case, the employer like mandates this training, and also it saves a lot of cost in terms of like the error of like seeing something in a manual and trying to apply and doing a lot of mistakes. Also, if you can afford these currently super expensive AR glasses, you can do games that are really fun. Like in your home, you have this new world of like in your furniture and your walls changing to reveal those hallucinations, I would call. And then you have also like an understanding that like the industry, as I mentioned before, the industry goal is to also reach out that become appealing to consumers, right? Not only for enterprise or people can afford something very expensive. But for that to happen, it needs to be lightweight, reliable, and also something that you not feel like a freak when walking in the street. Like, like in this case, in the scenario here, like you'll be able to go out and about with overlays of contextual information that are personalized to you, and then be able to reach out to the people you care about no matter where you are. It's important to understand like the vision here is to eventually replace the computer in your pocket with the computer in your glasses. That's a very long-term vision, right? Like why you need to have something that like you take it out when it's already like available for you. Now let's talk about AR at home. So like smart devices are being quickly adopted in the home, like especially like most of you are familiar with smart speakers, right? And now we have devices with a display like Google Home, Amazon Show, and Portal. That's these ones in this image here. And also the ones I work on. And they introduce this with those products, we're introducing new ways for people to interact with technology. While in the comfort of and privacy of their homes. There's a different context than when you're on the go. And also with a camera and with people hands-free, being able to move around, you can start to have, start having the person's full body as the interface, not anymore just like your face or like a touch device. And when the whole body is your interface, we can start to have to use AR for pose correction, in this example here, or for physiotherapy, for example. And there are many more uses, of course. And but as you noticed in the previous screen, like some displays are also meant for video calls, especially Portal. And speaking of video calls, like sheltering in place has caused video calls to use to skyrocket. Like we all, I mean, for both social and the work, and also for conferences like this one. And we all know that video calls are still very flawed. Beyond the obvious issues in terms of quality of the call, but we also have issues around the communication clarity, human connection depth, and expression quality. And I believe AR can play a role addressing some of these shortcomings and enhancing the overall experience. We are already familiar with like a virtual backgrounds, for instance, like Daniela is using appearance enhancement, face masks, avatars, like an emojis, and in some level also of shared experience, multi-sided shared experiences. All these can partially help with these needs. But unlike most of the previous examples, like on the go, in which AR was placed over objects and spaces, here we're placing AR over people. That's a very important distinction. And for example, like everyone here knows AR masks, right? That are pretty common and popular. But we want to go beyond that. We want to augment people's expression and create new ways for people to do things together and bond when they're remote. use this facilitation with technology. And right now, we're in the middle of this process of developing understanding on how AR can help facilitate that human interaction in a meaningful way. That's also it's not about just put people together. It's also making that connection meaningful, making that something, that moment memorable. Here's an example on how the same technology can be applied to different purposes. This is the story time that runs on portable devices. We created this experience in which we could help parents and grandparents that are remote to be able to connect to their young kids that are beyond the 10 seconds of attention they have, right? So I don't know how many of you have ever tried to speak with a kid over a call, right? It's more or less like this. Hey, how's your day? Good. What did you do today? Not much. Hey, do you miss me? And they say, then they leave the room and they start arguing about who will use the pink plate first. And then you feel horrible, right? So that was a real problem, with video calls with adults and kids. And so Storytime tries to address this problem by augmenting the expression of the adult. Here's a little video to illustrate that.
Once upon a time, there was a family of 3 pigs. Who here knows the 3 wolf rooms? I do. First, we huff, then we puff, then we throw the house down.
Sorry. So the masks and illustrations here, over the intimate call, creates this context and the alibi that for Grandpa to behave in a different way. He becomes something else, right? So Grandpa becomes a unique wolf, but it's still Grandpa. And the kids love to see the adults being silly. And then this becomes a fun shared moment that makes Grandpa and the kids closer to each other, despite being far away. So to conclude here, AI is a new tool we have at our disposal to make us preview and see things we couldn't before. But personally, what excites me the most is the potential that AI has in helping people to connect in more meaningful ways, when together and when far apart. And we are just at the beginning of this exploration. And we need your help of all the designers and everybody to shape this future that we want to build. And really, that's pretty much what I'm going to say. Thank you, obrigado, all of you. And I'm going to pass back to Daniela.
Thank you, Belmer. That was incredibly inspiring. When I was little, I used to love watching the Jetsons. Anyone who's as old as me probably remembers that cartoon.
Oh, yeah.
And I dreamt of living in that world. And it's so exciting that we're living in a world that's almost like that. And in some ways, even more, exciting because of technology than the Jetsons. So I would love to invite all the panelists back, and also Karen and Fabrizio, if they're still on the line, and go around and just talk about what do you think has been the most significant innovation in terms of having an impact on human behavior as you think back through the last 10 years, if you will. And maybe we'll start with you, Belmer.
Oh, sure. I mean, besides the elephant in the room, like the smartphones, right? It's that change how people get information and also the attention span of everybody. I think one that I wanted to call out to highlight is development of machine learning, despite being its creation dating back from the 50s, just now the last decade with processing power and big data sets, we could really make it shine. And this unlocked so many things, from road understanding for self-driving cars to smart assistants to live translation to biometrics like face rec and voice ID. And all those things became foundational technologies that enable the next level of human-computer interaction to emerge, including AR. So I think this changed fundamentally how we express our intent to machines that before was not even possible.
Great. How about you, Lucas?
Man, Belmer, you took the words out of my mouth. No, I think that machine learning is definitely, I think, where my mind is at. I was actually going to go more on the direction of voice assistants. Because to me, I think it's kind of a humanization of that technology. I think that as we have grown accustomed to ask for things using voice, personifying the assistant, whether it's Alexa or Siri or Cortana, I think we start to develop a stronger bond between technology and the things that allow us to do what we need to do in our lives. And it's interesting because in some respects, it's a very transactional kind of relationship where it's about turning the lights on and off, or helping me listen to some kind of music. But the more that we start interacting with these assistants using our voice, the more that concepts like machine learning and artificial intelligence become accepted and become just part of our lives. Some years ago, when I was working at Google, we were working on a product called Inbox. It was supposed to be a follow-on to Gmail. And one of the things that we sweat a lot of details onto was the machine learning aspect of how are we going to create quick replies that people could use. And one of the things that we loved about this was that we were looking at message pairs to understand what could one response be to a kind of a thing that was said. And many of us started to use these quick responses, and the feedback that we were getting was that, wow, you seem nicer, or you seem more personable. Because now you had at your disposal like a really easy and fast way to tap a button and evoke emotion where perhaps you were originally not going to do that. Responses like, "Oh, I love it," as opposed to "sounds good." And I think that it's one of these things that I think has been subtly enhancing the relationship that we have with one another, as well as making technology more accepted.
Carlin?
Sorry about that, I was on mute. So obviously I had listed what Belmer had said as well as what Lucas said. I think one thing for me, and I want to add to voice, is I don't think voice is quite there yet. I personally speak all of my texts and emails and correct them, so I use voice in my everyday life, but it still airs out a lot and has a lot of issues. I also want to add to voice is that there's been a couple articles in the UX community that have ripped the Tesla screen, thinking that people aren't looking ahead and that they're doing this. And it's important to note that touch is only one input, right? The voice is another input. So people are assuming that you're here in the screen, and you could just be like, turn on the music, through the voice input. So I think it's important. I think what I wanted to add to that is I think that voice represents a huge opportunity, one of the greatest opportunities as a different way of user input that we've only scratched the surface on. You think about conversational commerce, you think about eliminating touch, etc. So it's a huge opportunity. What I wanted to add to that, and you might not think of, is WeChat. I think WeChat has kind of changed the game of how we think of the internet. If you think about China, that really isn't using email or the web like we do every day, but really you can pay your utility bill, you can have your McDonald's delivered right here, you can, and it's totally changed the game of what the internet and the social and just combining everything into one that we don't experience every day. And that might be our future as well. So I want to add that.
Yeah, super apps for sure are definitely a trend. Karen and Fabrizio, anything you would like to add to this amazing list of innovations?
It's difficult to
I mean, I
that.
would just, go ahead, Fabrizio.
No, go Karen, please.
I was going to say, something that the most recent experience I had that made me say, oh, wow, this is great, was actually in the Tesla, where it actually helps you stop at the stop sign. So the self-driving is getting unbelievably strong. Not only self-driving, but also helping you to not have accidents that you might otherwise have. And I just think that that's been incredibly seamless. And I believe that is going to have a huge impact on many, many people's lives in a really positive way. And it may seem so simple and little, but the impact is going to be huge.
Yeah, if I can, I mean, the list is very exhaustive. If I can add one thing that I think you guys didn't mention is sensors and being and IoT and connection with the world and the whole data they generate out of this. I'm still, I mean, this, I have the feeling there was so much in the beginning of that. I'm an enthusiast of smart homes. I have you know, connected. I have a, you know, the kit and connecting. So if you open a window here and if you open the door, I know it's still on that level. But I think of like sensing and being able to like open the door and close the door from my phone from somewhere, and using these smart devices that track everything from the oxygen in my blood to you know, the amount of activity I'm doing, then types of activities, and all this amazing data. I think we're very much in the beginning. It excites me.
You're talking to the biggest Sonos fangirl out there. It's everywhere.
Same here. Mine is not as big of an innovation or even a new innovation, but I think about video conferencing. And because I remember 15 years ago, actually working with some, you know, really truly pioneer designers that and engineers that worked on Apple's technology group. And they would use their video conferencing project as an example of a failure, because they concluded no one wanted to actually be on the phone and looking at each other, right? So just 15 years ago, they were using that as a failure, and look at where we are now. And I keep thinking, imagine this, you know, shelter in place without video conferencing. We wouldn't have been able to adjust to working from home as easily. We wouldn't have been able to hold this event. So it's just really interesting to think about, like, it's super nascent and very low tech in some ways, right? But when you add AR and where else it can go, I think it's super interesting to see how the way we communicate is going to change.
And Daniela, to that point, what we don't talk about is the internet speed that has increased in that infrastructure. I mean, it's a hot topic these days, but 5G, but as part of the design review board for the city of Richmond, we had to help put those in. And I mean, without that, we might not be able to have this call, because with a presentation plus video, we'd be cutting in and out, right? So that's also an innovation we often forget about, that empowers all of these things, right?
Very true. Very
yeah,
true.
I think if I can add one thing that I think, you know, it's behind all of this is just you know, high speed wireless connectivity. I remember when I was at IDEO back in the day in the Bay Area, I went to Stanford, and they were experimenting with, it was an Apple project. It was an experimentation on education, connected education for kids. But at that time, you didn't have high-speed wireless internet.
Yeah.
They had some internet, and I think that was, you know, it stopped that type of innovation. But I think, you know, just having that ability nowadays and the possibilities that we have in education, for example, it's also exciting.
Absolutely. Lucas, I'm going to now turn it over to you, because I would like to speak a little bit about innovations that we're seeing in our industry. And fintech is such a hot topic. So I'm really curious to have you speak a bit to what we're seeing in terms of trends and changes in behavior, and then how we're designing for it in a fintech world.
Yeah, so you know, I'm actually fairly new to the fintech space. I joined Nubank last August, and it's been an amazing subject matter to get immersed into, and I think that Brazil is also an interesting context because you look at the history of financial platforms and banking in Brazil, and you compare that to models in the United States or Europe, and there's a distinct difference. I think that Brazil right now is kind of on a renaissance in terms of how to approach banking, how to approach finances. In November, there's a real-time payments platform called Pix that the central bank is going to be releasing. You see that for a little bit of time there, WhatsApp was doing WhatsApp payments here in Brazil. And so there is a thirst to innovate. There's a thirst to connect people with technology and banking. One of the trends I feel is really around empowerment. How do you put the control of your finances back in your hands? It's something that we're studying more and more of. You see a lot of consumers, especially right now during this pandemic, that may be out of a job, right? Because they're informal workers working on the gig economy, and how do you then have a relationship with a bank that is virtual? I think one of the things that we're seeing throughout Brazil, and I imagine throughout the world, is that the relationships that you once thought had to exist in the physical realm are now relationships that you're comfortable or find more accepting that they occur in a virtual sort of manner. Many virtual banks, many online banks are seeing an uptick in the number of customers because this has now become an accepted way of conducting business. The one thing that we've been doing, and it just so happened to be a coincidence in terms of timing. We had planned early this year to do a very deep ethnographic study to really truly understand what is the relationship with money that Brazilians have. And it just so happened that as we were getting ready to go conduct the first interviews, here in São Paulo, we went into a quarantine mode. Everyone at Nubank went to go work from home, and we quickly had to rethink our plans for how are we now going to conduct these in-person interviews throughout Brazil, keeping our staff safe and keeping our participants safe. So we went to a remote modality. We used Zoom, we used WhatsApp, and we were able to get some really rich information. And what I think is a trend is that the anxiety that people have with what the future holds, all the uncertainty that is before us, that combined with very large differences in how you look at money and how you think about your finances, depending on your income bracket, I think are all driving us to this mode where we want to be in control. We want to understand what's going on. So the concept of transparency is becoming more and more a fundamental expectation that people have. And people want to be educated and learned in how do I manage my money? How do I go beyond this modality where I'm thinking day to day or perhaps even month to month, and now I'm thinking about my long-term plans. Something that we heard consistently was people feeling that, do I really have dreams? Do I have aspirations? And we were tying that back to this uncertainty that people have as to the here and now. And I think one of the things that we're going to see more and more of is products and services that help give people a sense of trust and a sense of control over their destiny are going to be the ones that will ultimately prosper in this time.
Absolutely. No, and that's similar to, I think, like you said, to what we're seeing around the globe, just because I think of the pandemic and even the disparity, I think, in access to financial services that we saw even before the pandemic, right? And if you were in the underserved category, you had to essentially pay to be part of the equation and actually have access to financial services. You mentioned how this has also created opportunity. It's interesting when I think about the pandemic, one of the things that I think became more widely adopted is in contactless payments, for instance. And we were already seeing this in Asia, which you would see street cards with a QR code printed and posted on the side of a vendor with their cart on the street, and someone could then go up with their WeChat or their phone and actually pay for that food that they had just bought. And so starting to see a lot more, I think, of that adoption and democratization in some ways of digital payments, and a bit of that hybrid physical and digital world, I think, in all these situations. So Carlin, you've worked in e-commerce for a while, both at eBay and now I think with Tesla as well, and the e-commerce side of Tesla. So what are you seeing in terms of changes in behaviors and trends?
Yeah, so I mean, to tag on to what you were talking about, contactless payments, you guys probably have seen the news, how many cars we delivered, an incredible amount of cars during a pandemic, and having to pivot to touchless experiences. And, how do you operate a business in this climate? It can be pretty challenging. And I also recently had a best in class experience with Best Buy. I had some outdoor Sonos speakers installed. How much fangirl I am. And I was worried about the experience because I'm like, am I going to be safe? Is it safe? I was reassured because it was outdoor. But what I really valued was that the night before they call you and you commit to, are you going to wear a mask? Are you sick? Just to social distance. They have you watch a video. And by them taking their own employees' safety, making that so important, it made me feel like they were going to keep me safe. And I found that was a best in class kind of e-commerce experience during this time. I think also for me, China is a huge opportunity and market for us, as the global warming and the air, in countries such as China and India is borderline poisonous, can be, and there's a real urgency to get off of fossil fuels and to pivot to sustainable energy. And so e-commerce is, have been working in, consumer-based e-commerce for nearly 18 years, starting with Macy's.com back in 1998 when it all began, and they built a website based on IBM's technology. Fast forward, it's very different there. Like in, e-commerce is emerging. We saw customers come in with bags of cash. The credit system is very new there, and it's like we expect everyone has made the shift to e-commerce and mobile commerce, and it's very different. And there's also expectation of retailtainment, we call it, where they want an experience. They want to bring their friends for that test drive. They want to bring their family for that purchase. And here we're seeing the opposite. We're seeing malls close. So it's really interesting regionally how different things are, as well as evolving, like it's changing, and we see more and more of the business of China moving to e-commerce, especially with a shelter-in-place type environment, being a catalyst for that. So, it's very, very interesting just how things are, moving in this environment. So.
And Karen, you actually shared in more detail with me your experience buying a Tesla just very recently. Yeah. Maybe you could speak to how that went, since it was fascinating to hear.
Yeah, happy to. So we picked up the Y about 2 weeks ago, and what was interesting is, we had been on the wait list for a while, and we had chosen the color and whatnot. I think it took us like 10 minutes, and then we got a note saying, "Hey, it's ready. Move your money into this account." So we transferred the money. Took like 2 minutes. The next morning we got a text saying your car is at Fremont, parking space 42. Drove up to parking space 42, relogged into our app, got inside and drove away. Mm-hmm. And it was interesting because it was absolutely frictionless. On the other hand, I was like, wow, that took me all of like 5 minutes combined to dump a lot of my money into Tesla's bank account, right? I mean, like, it was seamless. So there is a real downside to this being absolutely frictionless.
Yeah, no, it's fascinating because it's not only contactless, it's humanless, it's frictionless, to your point.
Yes,
so
it is. And I'm thrilled and I'm glad I did it, but I thought, wow, you know what? In some cases, when we're making things so frictionless for people, we better also have a counterbalance to make sure it truly is in their best long-term interest.
Absolutely, tying back to that customer benefit. Yeah. All right, so shifting gears a little bit, what I wanted to just have a couple of you talk about is, we talked a lot about trends, but how do you actually learn about these trends, about customer behavior? So speaking a bit about sort of user research and discovery, and Belmer, I'm super interested to know how you do that for the work that you're doing, and then how you test and iterate as well.
It's not easy. Like it's very different than showing something that people are like, oh, this website is, or this app should be this way. Like so, a lot of the things we create, people are not familiar with that yet. So it's often really hard for them to evaluate. I mean, how much of the feedback is due to strangeness, and how much is come from actual use of what proposal. So sometimes, like when we get somebody a good reaction, like, oh, this is fun, or this actually solves my problem, that's clearly a sign that they're in the right way, but in the right direction. But in other words, for testing high-level concepts, like talking with people, it works really well. Like you get the feedback right away. But for refining the experience, it's much more tricky. Like as often too many new things being introduced in one user research session. Like for example, like you come to the person, hey, imagine this product now. Great. Now imagine that you're using this product in this context. Wow. Now imagine that you're using this service application within this new product. And now tell me what you do in a different way. How do you feel about that? So like it's like a 3 layers of unfamiliarity deep. Like, so it's really tricky. Like, so I think the approach you take with these ones, like of course, like in the concept level is pretty straightforward. Like at IDEO, other places, like you get the sense of like, are we solving a problem? Are we addressing a need, right? Like, but when you enter in the actual experience, I think there's like we need to extrapolate those things to what people care about and what they want to achieve, and create guidelines and principles. So we can use our experience, our intuition to iterate a lot. Like, so that's what I like a lot about this kind of projects, is because like the intuition is still very important. Like Fabricio was saying earlier about like the data metric centric like way to design, and I think there's a lot of space and need for this kind of design for particular situations. But the personal level, like my passion is like when actually like I can use my experience and my human intuition to make design decisions, and there's of course a risk there, like but to iterate and learn and get feedback. But that's why I think in that very innovation, there's no A/B testing, right? Like there's no like something before to compare. So very often, like what grounds us in this moment is understanding very clear, like what is the problem I'm trying to solve, and like what principles and guidelines of the experience we believe in. Like in terms of like I can give an example, like for story time, like that I shared earlier. Like when the beginning of the experience, like we started design, and we saw that we asked like a famous like company to do a prototype for us, like a effects company, and they created this amazing movie like in ER and the things moving around, and then like I was like, oh, this is amazing. But then like we realized like, oh, wait a minute, like this is taking over the whole experience, and it became the screen time. So like we had to use our principles, like actually what we want to achieve. Like our goal is to help both sides of the call to connect better and bond like in a shared experience. So if you create like a wall of a screen time, you actually are not achieving that. So we actually tone back a lot of the use of technology to allow the expression of the person to surface. And that was a way for us to make sure like that, especially when you're arriving in this, we're working in this kind of always in the edge of technology like we are, it's very easy for being like amazed and like, oh my God, this is so cool and should do this. And so it's important to have this grounding guidelines and principles to say like, okay, this is cool, but it's not the right thing to do. And that's a lot of the way we progress and design things.
Thank you for sharing that, Karen. I would love to hear from you, just because, similar to PayPal, I think in a bank, you have to consider that full customer journey. You have online and offline touch points. You have the bank agents and the relationship managers. You have customer support. So how do you actually collect those customer insights and then test and iterate?
Yeah. Well, and it's so funny because what we were doing is we were actually doing a lot of work with prototypes in the bank branches, right? We have a number of branches that are set up to be places where we can pilot. And that was incredibly helpful as we were redesigning some of these omni-channel experiences around account open. And then COVID hit. And so, now we're all a little bit trying to figure out what we're doing, right? And it's interesting because inadvertently, it has caused us to spend more time thinking about the digital experience because we're no longer getting that experience of physically being in the branches with the bankers and their customers. So I do think you have to be incredibly intentional. And so we're trying other ways to make that very intentional, really focusing on the principles, thinking about the interaction versus the other interaction. But again, it's hard without actually going to where this is all happening.
Yes, absolutely. I think that's probably, and Lucas mentioned that earlier too with Nubank. I think in our industry, the contextual part I think has been harder. Testing is a lot easier remote, but really hoping to understand users' context and their interactions is much harder to do remotely.
And I'm just hoping we're not all remote for that much longer. So when I look at those charts going like this, I get a little sad.
On the other hand, it's a lot easier to schedule all of the participants and find people who have time to participate. Yeah. So I guess that's the upside.
But to that point, Danielle, it gets easier to do the discovery and the understanding, but then when it's time to launch that new product, it's so hard in this market, So I think that's a big challenge is how, we don't know how long, and that's the uncertainty. Do we wait?
Right.
Are we gonna no longer see new products that aren't a shelter-in-place digital experience? Even the movie industry, we're gonna start seeing content producing. It's gonna be a lot harder. So I have friends in the film industry who are told they're on hold for their next season. So till September, and that just keeps getting pushed. So.
Yes, no, absolutely. I've heard some people are concerned that will run out of content to watch. So we'll see if that happens.
Right? Yeah.
So before we move over to audience questions, I would love to just hear, what do you think, are there any emerging trends that you see that we didn't touch on today? I feel like we covered quite a lot of ground, but is there anything else that you see emerging that we may not have covered? I think, Karen, what you mentioned, which is this notion of ethics in design. The other conversation that we're having very actively at PayPal is what we're calling justice-driven design. So thinking about how can we make sure that we're not only designing products that are inclusive, but that are actually deliberately anti-racist and anti-biased. I think is one of the responsibilities that we all have as designers. So to me, hopefully this is not a trend, but actually something, a practice that everyone will adopt and that will just keep getting better at. But
Daniela, that was something. Go ahead, Karen.
Oh, no, go ahead.
Oh, I just was going to touch about the inclusive design. That was something, Daniela, that I am thinking about a lot in approaching, especially with the older population, sometimes, Tesla might not be super easy for someone that's not as technically inclined as we are. And how do we not leave people behind? When we're thinking about a global business, how do we make sure we're inclusive of all the globe and not just one part? How do we, like you said, it's something I think about a lot, how I can make a difference, like with Black Lives Matter, is I can mentor someone more when they're younger and hire and have more people in the hiring pool. That's how I can make a difference personally, So I've been thinking about that a lot as a leader, inclusive design.
And Danielle, I really like how you're pushing on how can we be anti-racist, even going beyond inclusive. And I was thinking about that. I was listening to a podcast yesterday, and it was actually the history of mortgages and homes in America and how, it was really such a racist practice. And then over time, it became more about, well, let's just look at your zip code. But because redlining had been in place for so long, even when you're supposedly being blind, you're not really being blind because so much of our country, and I suspect parts of the world, have been just built on the foundations of racism, that we actually have to be incredibly active to start to dismantle that in a much more intentional way. And again, it was an incredibly eye-opening podcast for me, and I'm a little bit embarrassed that it was so eye-opening for me, right? That I hadn't realized some of this history before.
Absolutely. And across all touch points too, that's one of the conversations that we're having, right? When in digital, it feels like it can be more anonymized, but even machine learning and everything else, we've seen examples where bias can be introduced. If you call customer support and you can identify someone's origin or someone's race just by the way that they talk on either end, right? And how that influences those interactions. So I think that there's so much opportunity for us to actually address it and be proactive in every touch point for the companies that we work for.
Yeah, you spoke about designing for machine learning, right? And designing for other areas and make sure that it's inclusive. I think one of the practices we try to do is to mimic the diversity in our workforce as well, because there's sometimes if you only have men designing for women, it sometimes things do not even come to your head, it's not even bad intention, you just not conceive that particular problem, and having diversity of several segments, minorities represented, allows us actually to design better. It's not only a moral issue, it's actually a need for designing for a better design. And I'm happy that at least the environments I have been working, this has always been a very strong concern, and I would like to have this to be a more generalized thing, not only in some exceptional places. That's a lot of work to be done, and that we still need to make sure to show that I think not showing that beyond moral is also the right thing to do in terms of the better product, help the more adoption as well.
Absolutely. There's that business. It's just, it's like you said, it's the right thing to do. And there's also a business case behind having a more diverse workforce. So Margarita, do we have any sorry, Fabrizio?
No, just one last comment. I keep coming, I think, obviously the issue on diversity and how we position ourselves, it's extremely important. I think, and I think it was well said here. I think there's a completely different topic that's been in my head, which is how it's going to be the world in the next few months and few years. That I'm very. Has been a big topic on how much fear we're gonna have, how much we're gonna be able to come back to certain things. How work's going to be different. This is. I think we have no idea what's going to happen, how things are going to be. So I think that's something that, and even if things will come back to where we are right now, right? Depending on how it evolves.
To add to that, I was just listening to the conversation on diversity and inclusion. Just 100%. The thing that I find, I think, connects that point to what Fabrizio is saying, is around behavioral change. I think there are some very in-your-face mechanisms that we can use to expose inequalities and to expose how things could be better. But I also feel that there are things that we can do in design where we are those change agents. How do we combine psychology with design? How do we combine all these different disciplines and invite them into the world that we do, so that these changes can be not only possible but long lasting? And I think that we're at this really interesting cusp in our culture, be it here in Brazil or be it in the US, where people at scale are now listening. And I think that we have open minds, and it's, I think, our responsibility to make the right choices in not only how we structure our teams and the way that we approach our design, but how do we influence the population? How do we influence our consumers to also make those choices and just evolve in all these different exciting ways.
Very well said. Thank you. So Margarisi, do we have any questions from the audience?
We do, Daniela. Flavio Pfefferman from UC Berkeley is asking, what are some examples of great design and user experience in Brazilian companies, either mature companies or startups? And Carlin and Karen, if you are aware of following Brazilian companies, feel free to jump in on that as well. Daniela, why don't you start with that?
Great question. Well, of course, I'll have to say Nubank, not just because Lucas is here, but I think, Nubank has always been, I think, to all the points that were made earlier and to the point that Fabrizio made, has always seen design as user experience as a key differentiator and a competitive advantage. So, and I think it shows, frankly, in the experience. So that would be my top pick. And with that, I'll pass the ball to Lucas to pick something that's not Nubank.
Oh, you are putting me on the spot. So we'll start with me buying some time and saying go Bears. Great to have a question from UC Berkeley. Look, I think that, and I don't mean for this to sound like a super generic answer, but I feel that over the last few years, the product design discipline in Brazil has been maturing. I think it goes to what Fabrizio was saying in his talk around the importance of companies investing in design and not just saying, oh great, we have a couple of designers, or okay, like we have a junior manager looking after things. And so I see an evolution of the quality of design across a number of different apps and products here in Brazil. Everything from there's a company called Get Ninjas that allows you to find someone to come and work in your home, or install a TV, or do different things. There's another company called Dr. Alia that has been a great source for me finding pediatricians and dentists and other specialists as we get settled in over here. And there are elements of all these experiences that you can start to see are more and more in tune with what people are trying to accomplish and connecting them to those solutions. And so I think that there's a great evolution happening. I do think that the product design discipline in Brazil is nascent. But there's also a lot of fresh talent, a lot of desire for people to learn, and I see a lot of businesses wanting to invest in product design, because it's not only a differentiator, to say that you have a better design product. As I think we've been saying all along, it is a way to drive your revenue. It's a way to grow your business. And more companies are understanding that right now.
No, absolutely. And I think we're almost out of time. So I wanted to finish up by I think having each of us offer some words of advice, I think, for startups or for anyone who's a student or just starting out in the field of design. And I'm going to actually hook into what you said, Lucas, which is Get Ninjas. I was their advisor for 5 years. And was signed on as a advisor at the very, very early days. So I think not necessarily to be a self-serving comment, but again, just to go back to what the McKinsey report says, it's really, really important for companies to not just say we care about design, but to actually figure out how to invest in talent. And it could be that if you're a startup, maybe you're not at the point yet where you can hire a VP of design like Nubank has, but you could get a design advisor on your on your board. So I think that there's different ways to get that design voice early on, and that would be, I think, my advice for anyone who's starting up. I think hopefully you saw through this conversation, which is curiosity is what drives everything we do. I think the fact that we look at things from different angles and different perspectives, and that's how we solve problems. So go in with that curious mind into everything that you're doing and into exploring what your career might look like and how to learn more. Because I think that that's the sort of secret sauce that will set you apart. So with that, why don't we go around, and Belmer, maybe you can go first. We'll go in alphabetical.
I think one thing that maybe change, first depending on the area, if you take the area of machine learning, the friction to enter the space is much higher than before, like in the mobile, when it was a mobile startups. But I think what I like to focus more is in terms of privacy and inclusion are not like some add-on after that startups add in the product. Like before, oh man, this is the best idea, we're gonna solve the world. And you build it, and then you scale, and it's like, oh, we need to add this privacy, we need to add accessibility, we need to add inclusion, and this is not the acceptable anymore, right? This should be built in, it's part of the structural design of the product, and I think that changed, and that's a great thing. That's a great change. Like before, or maybe we are too lapse on those matters, or maybe before it was acceptable, some stuff now just not acceptable anymore. That's the bar, and the startup needs to meet that bar as well.
Absolutely. Fabricio, any couple of words on this?
Mm-hmm. It's interesting that you mentioned the study, right, and the relationship with startups. I think there's a discussion that we've been having with some people in the market and some startups. When we did the value of design study, it was looking at large companies, right? Listed large companies, but a lot of the learnings can be used in startups as well. So if I can say to startups, look at this study. Don't think it's for large companies. It's applicable to you as well.
Great advice. Karen?
I would say know what your customer problem is you're trying to solve, and figure out how you're going to measure your success to see if you actually made a difference. That's going to keep your company aligned in the number one issue that you need to focus on. And it'll also help you know if you've actually made a difference. Hugely energizing.
Yeah.
Carlin?
So we're often called the world's largest startup still. We do a lot with a little in terms of amount of people. So my biggest suggestion, something I've been doing recently, is teaching product and technology also how to be designers. And so coincidentally, I've been recommending the book Don't Make Me Think a Lot by Steve Krug. And so I always am advocating to don't make your customer do that work. Don't simplify on behalf of them. Don't make them think. It's and question why does it have to be that hard for them? So that's kind of my biggest flag I'm waving right now, is that simplicity and making things easier for a customer. For Karen.
And last, thank you. Last but certainly not least, Lucas, any final words?
I'd say come to an understanding that there is no such thing as a business goal that is not also a consumer goal. I think the faster that you come to realize that, the faster that you will align what it is that you are trying to accomplish with what your customers are trying to accomplish, and that's what's ultimately going to buy you the love that the customers want to give you, as well as the growth that you're looking for.
Thank you. I wanted to thank all of you for investing these 2 hours in sharing your knowledge and insights with our community. Truly appreciate it. And Margarisi, I'll turn it over to you to bring us home.
Echoing you, Daniela, how wonderful to have all of you here. Muito obrigada. It's been amazing. And I can testify that design, having a group of volunteer designers helping with the BayBrazil look and feel and logo and everything else, it really made a difference for our little organization. So I appreciate very much the work that you do. Much success. Muito obrigada. So for those of you joining us from the beginning or from the middle, usually we do have a musical opening in the beginning of our session. We couldn't do it at the beginning, but I think now we have our musician, Fabio Goto. Fabio, are you with us? Fabio Goto? Is Fabio in now? I was hoping to have Fabio do a final musical finale. I don't think we have Fabio. I'm sorry. Oh, I hope Fabio can be back because he was going to play a classical music, O Guarani from Carlos Gomes. We hope to have you back, Fabio. I think he's having connection problems. But to all of you who join us today, thank you so much. It was wonderful to have this discussion. Daniela, thank you for leading this amazing session. Muito obrigada.
Thank you. Obrigada.
Muito obrigada. Tchau.
Ciao.